Hello, and welcome to this re-impressions on Captain Marvel. So my format that I'm planning on doing, just for the record, is do the first impressions of whatever movie it is, then right after that, about a week after, I'll do my re-impressions where I'll go over more spoilery type things, so go over more details of the film that either could be changed or that I liked, sort of my rehashing of my initial opinion. And then in the next week, my plan is to basically just sort of bring those together with a final verdict or final opinion of the film. And so this is the second installment on Captain Marvel in that process. So, big ol' spoiler warning right here across the screen. Um, and so, out of the way, I'll give you about 5 seconds to stop watching. Okay, so Captain Marvel. This is my re-impressions of it. It's still pretty okay, thinking it over. It's definitely not a bad movie, like a lot of people are saying. Because I think the thing that makes, from reviews I've been looking at for other people, from what other people have been saying, is most of it is they disagree with the political side of it. There have been a couple that are like, well, it's a pretty decent film, but not the greatest, not the greatest one of them all. But I think it's kind of middle of the road for me. It's definitely not the greatest Marvel film ever. I kind of take it with a grain of salt where I'm just going to re-explain why I dislike Captain Marvel as a character. And when I say Captain Marvel, I'm not referring to Brie Larson, and I'm not referring to any of the other, I'm not blaming one individual for the character failure, because there's a lot of things that go into creating the character Captain Marvel. One of them is the writer. What was the writer thinking when they were writing the script? What is the director's interpretation of what the writer thought? What's the actor's interpretation of the director's interpretation of the writer's thoughts? Because all of that can get crossed, because when you're designing a movie, it's kind of like a giant game of telephone if you're not careful, where you're re-envisioning each section of it over and over and over again, and the initial meaning can be completely lost, which is not what you want, but happens, unfortunately, a lot of the time. And I think that happens with this film, is the biggest failing is that it fails to show the emotional state of Captain Marvel at any given point. Even if that state is that she is emotionless, it doesn't telegraph it well. So I'm thinking specifically, spoiler dot, in the scene where she is talking with her old Air Force buddy, and she's going, I feel like, this is very, very hard for me having you come back, because I feel like I lost you a long time ago, and I just got over this, and now it's all flooding back. That's the scene that I remember happening. Let me know if I'm remembering it strangely, too. In that scene, from what I remember happening, Captain Marvel basically goes, yeah, okay. Really? Like, there's no... Captain Marvel is completely emotionless. There isn't a point where she even conveys that she doesn't know how to react to that. And it's hard for the audience to empathize with not being able to react. Like, you can empathize as long as you can tell there's a struggle there. But she just sort of blows it off and goes, yeah. So? And that's not how a human being who cares about people would act. Which I think is a real failing. You just need to fix that. All you need, even if you're planning on going with the emotionless, doesn't know how to respond route, is have Captain Marvel say, I think I can identify with how you're feeling, but I'm not sure how to react. That's 10 seconds and conveys to the audience, this is exactly how she feels. It's that simple, and doesn't take that much time to do, and you've already made the film that much better. Next scene is the scene at the end and at the beginning, and how they correlate. So you have the fight with Talos, I think I got that name right, and you have the training with Talos at the beginning. Okay, here's my issue with that. I pay attention to a lot of, like, Hema, for example, is probably the largest thing I pay attention to, which is historical European martial arts, which is all about swordsmanship and discipline and how to fight people and stuff like that, which goes through that sort of exact stuff he's training her to know, which is the don't let your emotion get in the way of what you're trying to accomplish, because your emotion will cloud your judgment, which is kind of what the film says is a terrible idea, which I just completely disagree with, because I've made emotional decisions that were mistakes a lot more than I've made rational decisions that were mistakes. So, when your message to the film, and that's the core issue I have with it, is the message of the film is, always listen to your emotions and never think anything through, and that's what'll win you the day, which is flat out wrong. And we saw that in Infinity War, so why would it work now? So that's sort of my core dislike of it, and here's how I would fix that. It requires a lot of changes to the movie, because you have to change the core message of the film, is have, and they could be doing this, I'm not saying they're not doing this, but have her emotions, if you're going to have her stick with that route, lead her into situations that are a net loss for everyone she cares about. That's simple. That is what you would need to change script-wise for that to work. Is have, for example, at one point in the film, the villain switches sides, and then she's fighting Talos at the end of the film because, surprise, he's the villain. You should know the spoilers by now. Just putting that out there. So if you put that there, then you have this... it's hard to articulate. It's sort of like, if you have her switching sides again, that's like a double reversal, which is kind of dumb. You don't have much time to actually set up a villain, because you've spent half of your time misdirecting the audience into two other villains, or from one villain back to the old villain. Which is a real issue when you're trying to have a cohesive, understandable plot, because of just how convoluted that can get. But the way I would go about it is, you have the Kree, you have the Skrull, and those are the aliens that you're coming up against. The big clincher is, okay, have that training scene at the beginning, establish that she doesn't want to not use her emotions to win fights, that's fine. Then, keep going normally in the film, have her attack the Skrull place, then get captured, go to Earth, all that. Then, once she's on Earth, she loses contact with Talos, and she starts talking with the Skrull, sorry. Then, gets won over to the Skrull side of the argument. Then, once she's in contact, have Talos come back earlier, get there a little quicker, I guess. Once he's back, have her reconvince her of the reason why he's right. And then you'll have a showdown between Talos and the Skrull, and then she'll have to decide which one she agrees with, which is the more emotional side of the fight. I don't know how climactic that would be, because that's a concept. It's not a fully fledged idea. But that's what I would have preferred from the plot, just because if you're trying to establish Kree culture and Skrull culture, and how those things are different, you're going to want to actually show how emotional decisions are going to not be useful in that situation, because they're both emotionally manipulating you. Whereas if you approach the same situation by pure reason alone, you can come out with a much harsher decision, but it'll probably be the decision that is most helpful towards you and those you love, which is what you want actual people in the real world, when caught in that situation, to actually do, because you want it to be a net benefit to society instead of a greedy person killing a bunch of people for some reason, which is sort of what you get when you make emotional decisions. If you look across history, is when kings and different leaders make emotional decisions, a lot of people die for no reason, and that's what you don't want to be teaching an audience with a movie, because a lot of people can die for no reason. I'm not saying it will. I'm not saying that at all. I'm just saying if you propagate that message long enough and loud enough, that can end up happening because you're teaching people to not think things through, which is never a good idea. You want to think through things as much as possible because that'll help you make a correct decision, and that's, I think, the core failing of Captain Marvel is emotions are important, don't get me wrong, but you want to have a healthy balance of emotion to non-emotion, to actual reason, because it's not that you can't be emotionally reasonable, that's what empathy is, reasoning emotionally, but Captain Marvel doesn't have empathy. She just sort of has anger and disdain for the strangest things in that film. So I really don't think that it's got a good set of core messages. It has decent messages throughout the film, all in all. It has some decent get down, get back up. I really like that portion of the film where it's the, yes, you keep trying, you're human, you'll make mistakes, you keep trying, you keep pushing through. But then when you counter that with, you're human, never think anything through, emotions are your best friend, and just kill anything that gets in your way, that's a very, very bad, dark message. Don't do that. And that's, I think, my biggest issue, sort of thinking across more of my thoughts on the film. There are a couple more minor things that I just sort of dislike, like, I'm kind of okay with the way Nick Fury loses his eye. I wish it had been more important, because it's a big character thing for Nick Fury, and I like Nick Fury, so I kind of wish it had been more gravity. Like, for example, in Winter Soldier, I think it's Winter Soldier, it might be Civil War, where he says, the last time I trusted somebody, this happened, and points to his eye patch. Now that makes absolutely no sense, because it just doesn't make any sense. And I'm not going to spoil the way Nick Fury loses his eye here, just because I want people to react to that the way they want to react to that. I don't want to... It's not big enough of a deal for me to really care about talking about it, but those are my core dislikes about Captain Marvel. Things I like about Captain Marvel sort of been strewn in there. I really like the power set. Special effects are great. I do think that her powers could have been more clearly defined, but they were never clearly defined in the comics. Another note is that the lack of personality of Captain Marvel is the way she's written in the comics too. So it's not like they're being disingenuous to the source material, having her be a lump of wood with superpowers. It's just, you can do better now. And you can write better characters now. So do it. Because I think people would have been fine with you making Captain Marvel a more characteristic character than she was in the comics. And she was, at points, a very emotional person. But for the majority of the comics, at least from what I've seen, and different, like, I'm mostly informed by some of the earlier Marvel TV shows, so she wasn't written well in those, but maybe if you went through more comics, you'll find more emotional moments than I did. But she isn't written that well to begin with, so I feel like you can make it better, and should make it better, because she's a good character. You can make her a good character, so do it. But yeah, that is my core brick wall ideas against and for what Captain Marvel the movie is. This goes into a lot more of the message than I did in my first impressions, so hopefully that's useful, but again, I hope you enjoyed it. I hope you come up with your own opinion of the movie and not just copy mine. If you agree with me, that's great. If you disagree with me, that's great. Put that in a comment so that I can still, because there's going to be one more video on this, so that I can still think through more of my thoughts and sort of solidify my opinion of the film as a whole. And then, once it comes out, I will probably do a review of it once I have access to more of the footage. And can show you things somewhere on the screen, or the entire thing. Just because I feel like it does need to be talked about. It is similar to Black Panther in terms of it can be agenda-driven and it cannot be agenda-driven, depending on the way you look at the movie. So, yeah, other than that, I would just say have a great rest of your day. I hope this was helpful, or you enjoyed it, or it was entertaining in some way. It was a lot more in-depth philosophically than the first video, but it's out there now. And then we'll have the third one coming out next week as I sort of bring that opinion to a full solidified opinion. But yeah, thanks, and I will see you next week.